everybody, Friday night. It's Joe Chaffee here. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and I also want to welcome my app users who can actually watch this live stream on my Android app. So if you've got an Android device, just pay attention to the chat in a little while. In fact, I could just pop it up there right now and give you a link to it so you can download it, and then the next time, if you can't get to YouTube for whatever reason, or you just find it more convenient to watch it on the app, you can, because I send notifications out and let you know that it is there. So here we go. Let's go put it on the chat board here for you. And if you're new to my YouTube channel, also welcome and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you'll get direct YouTube notifications when live streams are on, and they are on once a day. William Hubert, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. That gets me a cigar on the way home from work tonight. I have to tell you, Fridays for me are tough. By the time we get to Friday, I am so burned out, to tell you the truth. I really am. And we find ourselves having a real difficult time completing sentences, as I am right now. So we're going to look at this winter storm that is beginning to organize here in the west. It is in the southern. The low in itself is in the southern plains. The snow with this will be in the central plains, and then work its way up into the upper Midwest, Iowa, southern Minnesota, and into Wisconsin. I think Nebraska might take the brunt of this, where there will be 1 foot plus snow, and they are, I think that they're going to get the worst of it, because they're going to get the heavy precip, and there's not a lot of cold air. There's marginal cold air, so we'll watch and see what happens with this. I'm kind of going with the more aggressive dam than the other models, although the other models are also showing a fair amount of snow. I think this may wind up outperforming. The satellite signature on it is pretty impressive. You've got a lot of tropical moisture coming out of the Gulf of Mexico with all this, as the satellite shows. And in fact, we have severe weather possibilities here. And I've got the Storm Prediction Center tonight a bit on the busy side. And we have, you don't often see enhanced risk in the month of the end of November, beginning of December. But there you have it, enhanced risk for severe weather for a portion of Arkansas, northeastern northeastern Texas, southeastern Oklahoma. They actually have the tornado watch up tonight to the west of the enhanced risk, where the threat will materialize first. Also a slight risk in southeast Louisiana and southernmost Mississippi from this system. It's not especially deep, but you do have a lot of tropical moisture that's surging up out of the Gulf of Mexico, and a very strong upper air shortwave involved here that's going to be a pretty good trigger mechanism. Introvert, I saw your comment here. I'm going to address it in a second. We're going to go to the watches and warnings map. And I'm going to just, tell you right off the bat, I mean, at least from the standpoint of my own knowledge, of course, I know my area well. I don't necessarily know the little intricacies of the climate in your neck of the woods, talking about southeastern Minnesota. Don't worry about what the forecasters are saying, okay? Rather than do that, they're going to stick with, they're going to have what they have. I wouldn't worry too much about that. The situation is dynamic enough. One of the issues for where you are is that the storm will have passed its peak, and by the time you get into it, so you're probably going to wind up getting a bit less. But I still think that you could do fairly well with this from the standpoint of snowfall. So I think your issue is with respect, I believe, to the winter storm, where all the winter storm warnings are. So let's take a look. We're gonna go. We'll bring up the map here. We'll bring up and show everybody. It's a very, very busy map tonight with regards to where all the watches and warnings are. And you can always, check on these by going to weather.gov. But large area of winter storm warnings up for Nebraska, southern South Dakota, and southwestern Minnesota, northwestern Iowa. Get it straight, Joe. And then winter weather advisories extend to the east of there into Wisconsin. Just bear in mind, there's timing here as well, because Nebraska is going to be taking the brunt of it during the day tomorrow, and your snow is going to be coming later in the forecast period. So if they wind up extending those winter storm warnings northwestward, particularly because this is a long duration event, don't be surprised. Tornado watches in the yellow, as I indicated earlier on the risk map. We've got also winter storm warnings up again in the west, in the mountains of eastern California along the Nevada state line, and on up into southern Oregon, extending almost to the west, not quite to the coast, but just inland of the coast in Oregon and northern California. And this is going to be with the next weather system that's coming in behind it. Got an area of winter storm warnings up in northern Montana, so we're seeing this extend up into the Rockies. In the east, we have winter weather advisories, and they're early in the game. There probably will be more of these going forward for northeastern New York and for Vermont, and I think you're going to add a good chunk of New Hampshire and Maine to this. And this is going to be for snow and sleet and freezing rain, because the warm front is going to eventually make it pretty far to the north. Flood watches for the Florida Panhandle, a small portion of southeastern Alabama and southwestern Georgia, and we've got high wind issues throughout southern and eastern New Mexico, West Texas, also with various high wind advisories and some high wind warnings out of all of this. So it's a pretty potent, fairly potent winter storm given the time of year. And here are the Weather Service forecast amounts. And I don't know what the criteria is for winter storm warnings because the actual digital forecast for southeastern Minnesota, there are some 6 and 7 inch numbers there. I'm thinking maybe 6 or higher is the criteria, and perhaps they only went for 6 on the top side in some areas. I don't know exactly where you are in all of this, but you can see where the big amounts are, all throughout a good chunk of central Nebraska with 1 foot plus snows there, and in the southern parts of central South Dakota. Okay, and a larger area of up to 6 inches that goes all the way up into the Rockies and also southeastward into the rest of Nebraska, and then the amounts start to tail off as you go into Kansas. You've also got snows being indicated. This is total snow through Monday, so this is also going to count the next weather system that's coming. We're going to get a fair amount of snow in the southern Rockies as well from the next weather system that'll be coming in. And also throughout much of the northeastern third of Arizona, through a good chunk of Utah, the higher elevations with a foot plus. The same goes for Idaho. And then out in the west with those winter storm warnings in the mountains, we're talking about 1 to 2 feet. You know, when it snows out in the Sierra Nevadas, it really knows how to snow there. Okay. Eventually, some of the snow will extend up through Wisconsin, north of Milwaukee, it seems. Chicago not getting anything out of this. We've got snows up for the upper peninsula of Michigan and also even for the northern areas of the lower peninsula. In the northeast, it's a general 1 to 3 inch snowfall. We might beef up those numbers a little bit as the system gets closer over the next 48 hours. We'll take a look and see how the moisture field fares up. But definitely busy, busy, busy. So we'll go to the surface map at the moment. Here in the northeast, we are basically under a high. We had some precip today with this weak upper air disturbance that came out of the plains, and enough of it held together that we got a little bit of rain today, a little bit of sleet, a little bit of wet snow. Those of you who are watching from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England can attest to that fact. It was, I would call it, the cheapest of cheap thrills. The ground temperatures were all above freezing, so our municipalities hopefully were not out brining and salting like they've been doing on and off for the last few days for no particular reason. And as we go up into New England, it's not all that cold, quote unquote. Remember what we had with cold back on Thanksgiving, okay? So anything that's above that, even though for the season, for the time of year, where the average high is still in the 40s and low 50s, we are definitely below that, and we were below that today. A lot of areas didn't get much above the upper 30s and low 40s today. But compared to that Arctic air mass that came down, it is not super cold. This is not Arctic air that we have across the Northeast. The polar front at the moment kind of lies closer to the Canadian border, so gradually the colder air is going to get drawn southward. Right now in the areas where we have these winter storm warnings up, temperatures are actually in the mid-30s to low 40s for the most part. Some places even pushing up to about 44 or 5. But once that storm gets wrapped up, and here it is on the surface map, you've got a 992 low. So that's a fairly intense feature sitting right on the Oklahoma panhandle. And the warm front, actually they have it drawn as a long stationary front here, but the warm sector has set up across Oklahoma, Arkansas, and northeastern Texas into Louisiana, where we've got temperatures in the 70s, and in some places actually even have dew points in the upper 60s and low 70s. So this is a pretty ripe air mass, a pretty ripe warm sector that has set up in Texas and throughout, as we said, through Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana, and even down into Mississippi. You've got temperatures there in the lower 70s, dew points up into the 60s. So tropical air doing its job. You look at the buoys down here where you've got dew points in the 70s. So this is where the air is shooting up from. Very rich tropical moisture, and that's all kind of getting involved in this developing low. The radar at the moment in the Northeast, the precip that we talked about is now done and moving out offshore and saying goodbye. We've got some showers starting to blossom across northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, just north of that stationary boundary that we showed you. The warm sector areas are starting to see some downpours and perhaps the beginnings of some thunderstorms. So again, this is at 7:15. Those of you who are watching, 7:15 Eastern time is the time of this radar shot, and it would be wise that you check your local radars if you're watching this on a replay by going to weather.gov and going to your local National Weather Service forecast office for your latest radars, watches, and warnings. And we're beginning to see the precipitation north of the low center developing across Kansas and into Nebraska. None of this is snow yet, but it will be in time in the colder air, which is on up further north, and that gets drawn down. And out in the west, we've got some activity going on in Utah and Idaho in the form of some snow there. And here comes more energy and more rain into the Pacific Northwest as the next storm will be coming in over the weekend, and some of that rain will be getting into California. So very, very busy, active weather pattern going forward, and it's going to remain that way until further notice. And I think when I look at what's going on in a lot, this is a rather dynamic pattern. It's not, sometimes when you look at weather situations going forward, you can get setups where you know that it's extremely dynamic. Let's call this somewhat dynamic. The problem is that there are a lot of pieces, too many moving pieces, and we talked about this yesterday. With too many moving pieces, it makes the forecast very, very difficult going forward. And if those moving pieces were to come together in some fashion, you could wind up with an outcome that models may not necessarily be showing at the moment. On the other hand, you have it the other way and have those moving pieces not come together, and you wind up with not much happening. So there's potential in the long range. I also believe that given the kind of pattern that we have, where there's this sort of persistent amount of cold air not that far away, that if given the circumstances, if you get the right, let's call it the right in quotation marks, but if you get the correct combination of the active northern jet stream coming down with the very, very busy Pacific jet shooting these storms into the West Coast one after another, I think it's really just a matter of time before something comes together for an important snow event in the eastern part of the United States. The thing I don't know is when that will happen, but again, certainly the pieces are there. It's not going to be there with this system, but we'll watch it take shape here. The snows really don't get going until tomorrow morning when the low is in northeastern Kansas. You can see the gradient here is very tight, so there will be wind with this. This stuff is going to get blown around once it goes over to snow, and by tomorrow morning 10 o'clock, you have an increasing area of heavy snow that breaks out in northeastern Nebraska and into southern Minnesota, and eventually also into northern Iowa. The GFS is the warmer of all the models. I think it has a warm bias in it. So we're going to go look at the NAM in just a second, but I want to shift over to the east with what's happening. We actually have a bit of a high that's building tonight across upstate New York and New England. Cold air, quote unquote, not too cold, but cold enough, and dry air is beginning to appear. Noticing on the satellite that clouds are beginning to break up rather quickly in New England, and that dry air is actually going to funnel down southwestward, and skies are going to clear out here, I think, later tonight, or at least partially clear out. So Saturday, I think, starts out with sunshine. We will see clouds increasing as we go through the late morning and through the afternoon, but at least the morning part, we will have some sun, and I think the rain really kind of holds off until after sunset. But here you have it by tomorrow evening with rain at the doorstep of New York City, and it'll be on and off rain into Sunday morning until the warm front goes by. The GFS is being stubbornly slow with that warm front, and sometimes these warm fronts can get stuck. You think they're going to fly all the way up to New England, and they don't, and they wind up getting stuck very close to my area. So it could be a situation where, say, southern and western parts of New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania, except maybe the northeast, get into the warm sector, and those west-southwest winds where temperatures respond by climbing up into the 60s, and north and east of that front, it has a tough time getting above 50. I tend to think that eventually everybody's going to get into that warmer air. It's just a question of whether there might be some, how much cloud cover is there going to be for Sunday. Of course, by this time, the surface low, which now at least the GFS seems to want to move along, is well east of Michigan by Sunday night. The NAM was really trying to hold this back underneath the upper feature yesterday. But I think the NAM I just think the NAM has a better view of things in terms of the snow shield. So we'll take this back a bit and show you what the NAM's idea is. And of course, you can see where that squall line for the severe weather that develops in eastern Oklahoma and into eastern Texas by 1 a.m. These will be overnight thunderstorms. And then you have that second area of slight risk in southeastern Louisiana from that stuff that's in the Gulf of Mexico. That comes in. And the low is going to deepen and occlude out. It's almost like this, kind of pinwheeled arm that comes up and around. West and north of the low, you get into those heavy snows, and eventually the cold air just takes over everywhere into Iowa. But notice that, for southeastern Minnesota, the initial start of precip is rain and sleet, and it really doesn't go over to snow until later Saturday afternoon into Saturday night. While that happens back in Nebraska and in southern South Dakota, you're getting moderate to heavy snow and strong winds pretty much all day long tomorrow after about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And then the low starts to move northeast. You still have this kind of stretched out short wave, which we'll get to in a second. You see how the precip is lined up here. It's kind of bizarre. It's got this, you sort of have this area that runs from western Nebraska in a narrow band up into northern Michigan, arcs around toward northern New England, and comes back down out in the Atlantic. It's really bizarre. You don't have everything kind of concentrated around the low center. It's because the low is actually occluding out, and you're probably going to have a second low center developing at the point of occlusion near the south shore of Long Island that winds up intensifying, and you see it pop up on the NAM Sunday evening in the Gulf in southeastern Maine, and heading for right over just north of Nova Scotia. At least Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, you guys will get some precip out of this. It's going to be mostly rain for Nova Scotia, snow and rain in New Brunswick, depending on where you are, and snow and rain for Newfoundland. And after that, we still have relatively mild conditions into Monday because we got to wait for the whole system to kind of clear off the coastline, and colder air starts to come in. Starting from Tuesday, and particularly Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and probably into next weekend, we are going to have much of the east below normal temperature conditions. The one exception to that, Robert Sabatino, will probably be South Florida, because I know you asked earlier about this. You had, I think Miami got down to 47. Was it yesterday morning, which must have felt great. But you are going to be in more of a southwest flow as we move into next week, and the next weather front kind of gets hung up, at least initially, across central Florida. We're going to have to wait for the next system coming in from the west to do its deal and form a low along or just off the east coast come Tuesday or Tuesday night or Wednesday. And this is where, at least with the first system, things get a little complicated in the forecast. The forecast is very tough here, and I'll show you why. We're gonna do a little drawing tonight on the paint box. And all right, hang on one second. I'm telling you folks, Friday is never a good day for me. I like Thursdays because I look forward to Friday, but then once Friday's here, it's like I want the day to be over. It's been a long week. I want to, kind of take a break. So here you go. Here's your this is the, I think I pulled down the GFS, but it really doesn't matter because they were kind of both pretty close. But let me show you what's going on. When I was talking earlier about moving parts. The upper low that we're dealing with is now opened up, okay? And it's really stretched out into this. Oh, sorry about that. Hang on. I got to repaste the map. I made a boo-boo. 1 second here. Oh, it's a big whoops moment. Actually, it'll give me a chance to just kind of just back it up a bit. So let's start with early Sunday morning. Okay, so here's the upper air early Sunday morning. Just make sure you guys can see what I see, and you can, which is good. All right. So, all right. So here's you have an upper low right in here. This is our storm in the Central Plains moving into the upper Midwest, albeit very slowly. We have a short wave running from James Bay to just about northeastern Minnesota, okay? Ridge along the East Coast. We've got actually a weak but ever-present upper high sitting just west of Lake Winnipeg. In the meantime, the new system coming into the west has got a couple of pieces here that seem to be evident, and those are the next weather system. So you got a lot of moving parts here, and whenever you have a lot of moving parts, things become complicated. So I'm going to jump now. That is for Sunday morning. That upper low is going to weaken. So by Monday afternoon, and now we're going to go to Monday afternoon, and I'll paste that up here on the map. So now here's how the upper air has changed going into Monday afternoon. Your storm that was over here, okay, moving into the upper Midwest, now weakens and opens up, all right, to an open trough that's almost into western New York. There's actually even another short wave right in there, right behind it. Again, a lot of moving parts, and I think this second short wave here, we'll call that number 2. This is short wave number 1. That probably really marks the leading edge of the colder air that's going to be coming into the east for Tuesday and Wednesday, and then there will be another shortwave after that. That upper high you saw up near Lake Winnipeg drops southward and weakens, but it keeps the flow split. So you've got this northern jet here that is busy. And remember a couple of days ago where the GFS was trying to have a ridge here. Look how, I mean, it's 180 degrees wrong. The systems out in the west can get strung out. That whole southern jet is stretched here. This is the flow coming in from the Pacific, running across the deep south and then off the east coast. So embedded in here are two more short waves. So again, to emphasize the fact that when you have so many moving pieces like this, it makes the forecast crazy, because any one of these can change in character, either be stronger or weaker. The timing can change, the speed that these systems move across can change, and of course that has, you know, rippling effects all the way down the road as you go forward. Now we'll take you through, I'm going to take you a little bit further along here. So let's go to Tuesday night, Wednesday, because this is where we had, you know, potential for something to happen. I am still not, while it, you know, the run models from last night, overnight, the 0Z run was very interesting, but it was the only run of the last four where you were able to look at it and say that these short waves were going to time out and perhaps cause something to happen in the east for the middle part of this coming week. Since then, we've had you know, the models kind of really back off on it, and the reason why is when you look at this structure here, it's a mess. Short wave moving off the New England coast, another short wave upstream. This is all part of the northern jet, and actually you can't quite see it, but there's a third short wave that is in that northerly flow, and all of this is just, you know, marching along southeastward. It is bringing down cold air from Canada, so it's serving that function, but it is very busy, and you've got too much energy moving, you know, too much energy there. The southern part of the jet stream, and now you've got, by the way, just coming on the scene in the lower left, right in here, is a rather potent feature about to move into central and southern California for the middle part of next week. But here you've got one piece, here you've got another piece, and this is the lead piece coming in from over the weekend that is now sitting in the Ohio Valley. The big question here on this particular shortwave is, what are we exactly dealing with? Is it going to wind up being much more vigorous than the models suggest? We are beginning to see that we have to really wait for that energy to crash ashore to get a good sampling of data as far as what are we dealing with. There are instances, it doesn't happen a lot, but there are instances where the model just kind of misjudges what's coming out of the Pacific because of lack of data. It uses the satellite data. The satellite data is usually very good, but it's not perfect. And once we get a real sampling of what is actually coming in, it might have impact here on the effect downstream. If you timed out one of those northern short waves with one of those other short waves that were coming along more in the southern jet, then you could certainly wind up with something much closer along the east coast that would develop. I think, you know, judging from the last three runs and the European and the Canadian I think we're at a point that at least for the middle part of next week, for the 4th, 5th, and it probably might be more toward the 5th than the 4th, but it's getting a little long in the tooth. And if I see tomorrow morning, after after tomorrow morning's day run, if I don't see any kind of change in the overall pattern with this, I'm going to probably want to stick a fork into the possibility that we would see something happen for the early part of the week. Now, the latter part of the week, we've got more action, okay? And I'm going to jump to Friday here, because this is where, as I said, we know that it's going to stay cold and actually, get colder as the week goes on, because the northern part of this jet stream strengthens even more. And this is both good, this is both positive and negative. I shouldn't say good and bad, because not everybody likes snow, but let's say positive and negative from regards to snow. It does bring down a fair amount of cold air that's going to dominate the weather in the east, but it really kind of looks overpowering here when you look at it. Okay, the cold push goes down into North Carolina. It doesn't go all the way down to Florida. You'll notice that the flow down here in the southern part of the jet stream is, the air is actually coming from Texas and Mexico, so it's not, that cool air is not really making it all the way down. And here's that west coast energy now that is moving through the southwest and eventually going to make its way eastward. What needs to happen is that northern jet, now this is Friday, the 7th, what needs to happen is that northern jet has to pull out, but it has to pull out in such a way where it doesn't squash the southern system. There's always that delicate balance. If it pulls out too much, then you're going to have all the cold air pull out, and then you take this system up, and it winds up going inland or west of the Appalachians, and you wind up with one of these primary secondaries like we've seen, and you go over to rain. If it doesn't pull out enough, then you're going to have something like what we have for early this week, where it, you get something that comes off and goes out, well to the south and east. Of course, you'll have to wonder if you do wind up with this cold air being more important. That could make it kind of dicey for winter weather in the area that I just drew in, that I've just drawn in blue for late this coming week. All of this, please just bear in mind, all of this is highly, highly speculative at this point. I just wanted to give you at least a flavor for what exactly is happening here with regards to this system that people are going to have already been talking about for next weekend. It's always, it's amazing how I've seen things change over the years, particularly with social media. The obsession with the long range has gotten worse and worse with time. And again, this is the GFS's highly suspect solution. The European, by the way, was exceptionally bullish with this, but this is the European solution. This is for next Saturday, and you have that northern jet by Saturday starting to pull out. There's one last short wave that comes through Saturday morning, and here's your southern stream feature right here. So it would seem you've got enough of a northern jet here to keep cold air around. It would seem that the northern jet's going to pull away enough to allow this system to eventually kind of turn up, or try to turn up along the east coast. And that is sort of what the European did. Actually, it did it rather dynamically. When we get to Sunday, I'm just going to jump to the Europeans view. I guess we can start with Saturday so we can compare it head to head. So you can see how the GFS is handling things on the for next Saturday. Here's the Europeans view with the next system beyond whatever it is for Tuesday and Wednesday, but here it is. And here's your northern jet that keeps the cold air in. So the moving parts seem to be a bit less on the European. We can work with this as there's fewer systems. There's ridging back out in the Rockies going up into the northwest. You're probably going to see this northern part of the jet stream pull out to some degree. And when we go to Sunday, and I'll bring up the surface map for Sunday. Okay, I like to use the normal anomaly because it's easier on the eye. And you know what, we can go close. This is what the the European winds up with on the surface for next Sunday, which is, a low in a position where you'll wind up seeing heavy snow, and I can't show European snow maps obviously, but European did have a pretty large area of 1 foot. I actually should draw this further south there. 1 foot plus snows. I might have this too far west. Let me start that again. I'm kind of doing it off memory, off the top of my head, but I believe it had the snow maps where you had this area, a pretty large area showing big snows. Who knows? You print out, when a model prints out a map at a specific spot, it's going to generate the heaviest precip in an area that you would think is the most logical place to do it. When the next European run comes out, it may not have the low there. Maybe it'll have the low back here somewhere, moving up, being more of a coast hugger. Maybe it's flatter and it goes out east-northeast. That's why, you certainly can see the potential for things to happen when you've got all these moving pieces around. But you also have the potential for so many things that can go awry in your forecast. So you have to be very, very careful with this. There's the Europeans' view on the surface. This is for next Sunday. And the GFS for the same period has the low way down off the southeast coast because it still has that northern jet trying to overwhelm, and it moves it out to the northeast from there, if I remember correctly, and it does. Another big high comes down with cold air colder air for the longer term. At least that part of the equation seems to be holding going into the middle part of December, if that's correct. I also know from experience that you're probably, if you're a snow lover in the long range, you're far better off to see a storm being shown well to the south and east, because there's a pretty good chance that the GFS, because it loves to suppress and it loves to overwhelm cold air, there's a fairly good chance that the model over time is going to come back northwestward. That's pretty much how it works, how it has worked, and I suspect that is how it's going to continue to work. Back to the short range, and we'll get the NAM's snow map here. Again, very aggressive. The problem with the 10-to-1 is what you see down in downstate New York and northern Pennsylvania, because that's not going to happen. Okay, that's all either sleet or freezing rain, and these 10-to-1 maps are a bit deceptive. Where you've got these bigger amounts up in northern Maine, that may be overdone there because again you're dealing with some sleet and freezing rain getting involved. But I think in the areas where you've got snow, the 23 is a bit much, but I certainly feel comfortable with the idea that that area in green is going to wind up getting, there are going to be areas there that are going to get 12 or more, and extending maybe into the southern areas of Minnesota, you've got some 8, 9, 10, 11-inch amounts. You might want to cut them back by a third as you go further to the east, just to be safe, but I think that's pretty reasonable. Rainfall from the system in the east is not going to be too problematic, I believe. We've got some half-inch plus amounts, but because the energy is so far to the west, and the point of occlusion is so well away from the low center, I think you're going to wind up with probably nothing that can't be handled. We've had a number of instances recently with these storm systems where models have put out rainfall amounts and they have wound up being at the very least 50% higher. I'm thinking that this time around it might be more in line. If they are a little bit higher than what's being indicated, and the blues are all, the darkest blue is half an inch, and Johnny Question, you can see it gives you much less than that across Western Virginia and Eastern West Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Maybe up to a half inch. You probably might want to just go a little bit higher than that, but I don't think you're going to be in line for anything crazy. And of course, you got some bigger amounts of 2+2-3 inches across much of the southeast and off the South Carolina and right along the immediate North Carolina coast. So very, very busy pattern going forward. As I stated earlier, I think when you have a dynamic pattern like this, a potentially dynamic pattern like this, with a lot of moving pieces, it's going to mean for a lot of forecasters pulling their hair going forward. And that's why I kind of keep mine short, because then I can't grab it, so I can't really pull it. But I do get I will share the frustration in all of this, and I'm going to be very curious to see ultimately where this winds up with the system for Tuesday. I mean, you know, there's part of me that just wants to stick a fork in it and say, you know, we're done and nothing's going to happen with that. But for the variables I've already mentioned, I'm going to just kind of just keep on going and see what happens. Let's see. The thing lasted like a minute and 10 minutes. The sun was out, calm. Y'all, huge broken trees, parallel. Oh, Chad Crawford, what did you get? You get hit with the, you got hit with a thunderstorm. 100-year-old trees at 90-degree angles snapped at the. I'm kind of running the chat backwards. Microburst north of Atlanta this morning. A microburst west of Adairsville. Okay. Oh, okay. You're talking about August 17th, 2007. I was wondering, okay, as I was reading to that, I'm thinking, this can't be now. It's got to be, it's got to be from the past sometime. I should go from the top down so I can see the, you know, the threads a bit better. The FV3 GFS, or the parallel GFS, is the best model right now. Well, the new GF, well, the FV3 is actually going to be the new GFS. It's running parallel, and then they'll just make it the operational. I did not look at, I didn't look at it today. And if you're asking why didn't you look at it, well, you know what, folks, it's you can only look at so many models. After a while, sometimes I just forget. So you guys are here to remind me to make sure I look at it. So let's take a gander here. A bit more aggressive with the heavy snow with the system over the weekend. That's first thing. And there's your non-existent low for the middle part of this week that moves out. Actually takes it to form more Wednesday night and Thursday. So it looks like it's picking one of the other short waves to make that low way out to the east. And now here comes the one for next weekend. And look at, I mean, look at this. This one takes it west of the Appalachians. So the upper air probably pulls that upper, that whole, yeah, see the upper air from the operational to the parallel. You've got a ridge that pops up. So the northwest flow, the northwest flow, the northern part of the jet actually pulls out too much on the parallel GFS, and you wind up with a primary going west of the Appalachians. With, you know, none of these solutions are going to be right this early in the game. This is a primary secondary of snow changing to rain for at least the coastal Northeast, and then the low goes out and you get cold air coming in behind it. Who knows? Really, this is why. Look, even if the parallel GFS, if or any model, even if, you know, why that versus the European, any model that you could pick and decide at this point that that's going to be the model of, that's going to be just what that looks like, and I'm going to make my forecast based just on what that looks like. You're destined to make incorrect forecasts as far as the eye can see. The job in the longer range is not to look at the model prints. The job in the long range as a forecaster is to get a flavor for what is going on in the upper air and figure out what that all means. And then, you know, your forecast, you should be able to make your forecast outside of all those model possibilities and let the models come in to your idea than the other way around. I think that's what a lot of forecasters do, is when they're looking at things in the long range, that they do the reverse. They look at the model and have their forecast gets pulled to what the model is doing, whereas what you should be doing is looking at all the possibilities, coming up with your forecast, and then watch the models come to you. If you see that they are coming to you, then you did the right thing. You also see that perhaps they're not coming to you. They may only be coming part of the way. As you get closer and closer, then you start to make the adjustments that you need to make. But those adjustments you're making in those forecasts are not going to be as big they're going to be a lot smaller than someone who's just going to look at the parallel GFS and say, well, that's the one. That's what I think is going to happen, and just stick with that all the way along. I think that's a recipe for a forecasting. That's kind of a recipe for disaster. You want your forecast to be correct, and don't let the models control where you're going. Okay, let's see. GFS has always had that warm trend most of the time. The Euro and the NAM get it perfect. That's why next year there's going to be a new GFS model. Well, you know, the parallel hasn't actually knocked my socks off. It's had its moments, but it hasn't really knocked my socks off from the few, you know, I don't look at it very much. The long range is complex, Dio Nankumar, correct. There, you know, there's the volatility is there in the whole upper air pattern. With respect to what's going to go on longer term. I've read a lot of arguments, you know, a lot of arguments from a few of the long range people that I see their posts talking about perhaps a break coming in the pattern for a time in the second half of this month for a week or so, and then maybe toward the end of the month to have a reassertion of a cold pattern into the east. I don't know. Model's been having a tough time breaking down this northern jet, breaking down the northern jet way too fast, and you know, it winds up being far more important as we're seeing now this weekend. And it didn't even do it in the long range; it did it in the short to medium range. Zeke UK 416B. I want people to discuss that. I think that's a good thing to do. This is how, you know, I learned. You learn by, you know, you basically learn by your errors, and that's the way it goes. So you gain your skill by repetition in the weather world. You start to see a certain repetitiveness to a lot of how weather systems evolve over time, and this is what helps you. So I strongly encourage everybody, those of you who are, you know, into weather, you know, who really like this sort of doing this sort of stuff and being challenged by making forecasts. This is a great. You got all the stuff there in front of you to do it, and that's wonderful. And you know, it's not like when I started out, you really didn't. You know, there was no internet. We didn't have any of this access to weather information unless we were working in the environment. The number of models were very, very few. You basically only had two. And then, you know, in the mid-1980s, you suddenly had three, and then you suddenly started going out to longer and longer term in terms of the time frame. So it was a work in progress, and it's still a work in progress. So this is a good opportunity for those you younger forecasters that are watching to cut your teeth on your own. And, you know, the beauty of today's world and the technology world and the internet is that if you want, you can have your own platform. And I think that is a good thing. The frustration, I think, lies, ZUK, I think the frustration really lies in what people want as an outcome. And there is, there's a special group of people we call snow weenies, okay? They they love snowstorms and they love snow, and I have to admit I love, I've loved snow since a kid, and I still do, except that I have the added pressure of making the forecast. But nobody enjoys watching snow coming down and more than I do, if I don't have to drive in it, okay? And I've driven in a lot of these snowstorms. So in these, as we go through the winter months, they're going to grasp at whatever models give them the most favorable outcome. They call it wish casting, and that's fine if you're not doing it professionally. But if you wish cast as a professional, you're probably not going to be doing it for a living for very long. You have to kind of put it out there, out of your mind, and be objective. So this is, again, a good opportunity for people to just, for you enthusiasts out there to really get a good handle and a good familiarity to all the weather models. That's what I hope that I do when I do my nightly live streams every night. the 2007 flood. Okay, I'm sorry, but which flood? You know, Joe Rayo needs to be here for this when you ask about you know, past. I used to be so good at remembering things, and I'm not remembering the flood in 2007 and what it did. I'm sorry, I just don't remember. Is this the type of pattern, Timothy Veltman, that we need to pay closer attention to the potential of something consequences popping up in the short range? Well, I think when you yes, I think you do. You do. When you've got too many moving pieces like this, you know, you could wind up getting thrown a curveball at the last minute. Always be alert to that. If something is going to happen the middle of next week, you're perhaps going to see an example of that showing up in the models, but you'll have to start seeing it soon. You'll have to start seeing it over the weekend. Again, I'm kind of thinking, you know, at least for the middle of next week, that we can, you know, pretty much stick a fork in it, but because of the whole setup in the upper air, I'm being very cautious with regards to that. I'm gonna wait. You know, I want to get through tomorrow. Let's see what the models do overnight. Let's see what the models do tomorrow, and if they still show this really suppressed look, then you know we can move on and start looking further down the road. Do the rainfall forecast, do they take the mountains into account? The models don't always do. Okay, the models don't always take that into account. Let me just see what WPC did. I've got their map hidden in here somewhere. I've got so many open windows sometimes. There we go. Let's bring up WPC's map, because I do like. WPC, I think, does a pretty good job in putting out a 7-day forecast, which is very gutsy. But you'll notice, Johnny, that they're not really overly impressed with the rainfall over the next 7 days for your area. They've got you in this big hole of a half an inch or less. So let's hope that their forecast verifies. Again, I think because of the fact that with this first system, the energy being so far to the west, and the system just basically getting stretched out in an east-west fashion like that, it doesn't look like you're going to have a large area of rain that develops that I would consider to be problematic. At least that's what I'm thinking of at the moment. Actually, Timothy, at least for you up in upstate New York, it's a slim or none. Yeah, listen. If we were looking at the possibility of you getting snow from the one on Wednesday, then I would think by now you would have to have precip being showing up all over the place, and that's not happening. I think the if something comes of the system for the middle of next week, it would be more for the immediate coast and not really that far inland. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, you're up in the Hudson Valley. You've already seen a fair amount of snow. You can, if it winds up, that something were to happen someplace, it would be to the south. So Ryan Kane, again, if it's a southern system, that's where it would be. I think the odds are, let's just say, to be fair, at this stage of the game, given what we're seeing so far, that the odds are pretty long. We're just going to wait for one more forecast period with regards to this, and as I said, if tomorrow we're still seeing this suppressed look, then I think we can just say it's time. It'll be time to move on. The key is going to be, what exactly are we dealing with when it comes into the Pacific Northwest? And the other question is those short waves in the northern stream. Are they going to be there where the models have them? Are they going to be stronger? Are they going to be not as strong? Are they going to be faster, slower? All of that timing, all the timing issues that are going to be coming into play with that particular system. Okay, so we're done for the most part. 54 minutes is a pretty healthy live stream for a Friday night, and considering that usually, as I said, Fridays are not my best days, I thought it went pretty well. So again, those of you on tonight that have an Android device and are in the area, northern New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, the lower Hudson Valley, my app would work pretty well for you. I've got forecasts on there. I have to write a broad forecast because I'm covering a large geographic area. That's where my audience is. And you also get to read my other longer range posts. They'll come down on the app, and you will also, in case for some reason you can't get on YouTube, you can watch these live streams. I've got some app people watching tonight. Thank you for being here. So you can watch it on the app itself. So the link is up there for those of you. It's on Google Play, so you have to have an Android device, and it won't work for, obviously, it's not going to work on an iPhone, but the iPhone version of this, again, still waiting for Apple's approval, and they are notoriously slow. So hopefully we will get their approval soon. I would love to have it with the winter season getting underway to get it going. But that, again, is absolutely free. If for those of you who might be interested in a, let's call it a more complete weather experience, I would recommend that you take a look at my weather platform that is on Patreon. That is a subscription platform. It's just $2 a month for the price of a cup of coffee, and you get regular posts. You get posts on there that you don't get on the website, and you're not going to get on the app. You also get to, you're able to message me at any time with comments, questions, or whatever. And also, you get live streams just for Patreon members. Today's Patreon members got the live stream while we were doing stuff on the air here where I work, and you were able to see, you know, the TV, the sausage basically being put together here with the TV folks in action while I was trying to do the live stream. But you do get an extra live stream every day. I usually do it in the morning where we look over the overnight weather models. So then that's just $2 a month, and the link is up there. It's also on link on my website, and there's a link on the app if you want to add the Patreon platform to your weather experience. We are, of course, in the Christmas holiday season. So for those of you who are shopping on Amazon, you can shop on the Joe Stradamus link, which I have. And I'm going to put that up on right now. Here we go. And I think I got everything spelt right, so there it is. You can shop on that Amazon link. We are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and their affiliated sites. So if you go to Amazon via my link, Gloria Rangot, nice to see you. If you shop on Amazon and you use my link, you use my link. Yes, yes. Hang on a second, Reaver. You can't get those shower curtains on my shower curtains on Amazon. But if you shop on Amazon for your stuff using my link to get to Amazon, Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, and I get some cigars. You don't have, it doesn't come out of your pocket at all. And I thank you very much for those of you who have done that. I really appreciate it. Every little bit helps to go pay the bills that I got. Everybody knows we all got bills to pay. And Reaver, I actually sold a shower curtain on my Joe Stradamus store. And you can find that on my Facebook page, a link to that, or you go to joestradamus.myshopify.com, I believe it is. And I've got some stuff on there. I've got mugs and, you know, phone cases that have hurricanes and tropical storms on them and that sort of thing. So you can take a look if you'd like. All right, folks, have a great evening. A live stream this weekend, Ryan Kane. Yes, probably live stream. I'll live stream tomorrow. I don't know when exactly, so just look at the schedule. Sometimes I tell you one time, and on the weekends it gets a little bit, you know, dicey with me because I'm trying to find some downtime too to take a break. But we definitely do a live stream sometime on Saturday, and probably later on Sunday we will also do a live stream. So just watch for the live stream schedule on YouTube when I put it up the time. When I put up the time, so that you can make it, and of course make sure your notifications are turned on. I'm fine, Matthew Crabhill. I hope you are well. Joining late, so you may have to go watch this from the beginning. Okay, have a great night, everybody. See you over the weekend, and be safe and have a good time this weekend at some point. Don't spend it all Christmas shopping, okay? And happy Hanukkah, by the way. Hanukkah starts Sunday night. Happy Hanukkah, and we will see you.